各位嘉宾，我们现在进行教育的部分啊。那我们今天请来的嘉宾代表们，其实他们在不，其实像 Peter 他本身有主持在挪威有训练经纪人的学位，是在学士后的学位，是 Master 的学位。那我等一下会请他谈一下有关经纪人这部分的一些问题啊。那 Eric 他代表的，因为这次纽约的那个风灾哦非常严重，本来我们有请到几位代表，学校的代表都因为风灾没办法过来，因为风灾严重到什么程度，就是说到电力到今天才正式都恢复哦，很多地区还是没有。然后很多人呢，其实因为温度是接近0度，都跟宠物一起过夜，就是抱着他们一起在发抖中过夜，所以是很严重的。然后所以说今天就由那个 Eric 代表，然后还好。他们没有来，但是我已经到他们那些学校跟他们谈过，也拜访过，所以我可以代表那些学校也表达一些看法。那我们也有从瑞典来，就是比较特别的，这是一个什么样的学校？然后来自于比方纽约这边Eric 他代表的一些学校，像 Berkeley， 还有你自己毕业的母校。然后周先生呢，他会从这些学校这部分，因为他参与的部分，从投资的角度，从教育这个角度来看，就是说这样子的一个产业里面，其实需要的就是说，包括财团的支持，然后一个教育这样子，从什么样的从什么样的方式来做，会有比较一个健全跟一个良好的方式，从这样子我们来打造成一个好的一个为流行音乐产业界人才培育的一个计划。那其实我们经过了2年的资料收集之外，我们也跑了很多的地方，跟很多不同区域的学校做交流。那其实学校这方面呢，其实有很多种新的趋势。那我先请他们各位来做一些说明，之后呢，我在总结的时候，我再跟大家做一些简单的提示跟报告。首先，我先来问那个 Peter Jenner 先生啊，就是说，可不可以请你大概介绍一下像挪威这个学校您担任教职的这个学校，就是指导教授的这个经纪人制度这个部分，然后或者是说您提一下，在英国有没有什么学校流行音乐部分特别引起你注意，或者在您从事音乐工作这个生涯里面，有注意到特别哪些学校教出来的学生特别优秀，在哪一个国家都没有关系，就是请皮特先生跟我们分享这个，其他人当然。类似这个同样的问题也可以跟我们分享。那下一个可能 Mark 可以请你跟我分享，因为你从本来我们要邀请来的一个学校是在纽约已经成立了30多年，就是 Institute of Audio Research 这个学校非常重视实务的一个学校。他们学校我去参观的时候，他们刚 install 一个 Euphonic 的一个 console 是 fully automation 啊，就是 engineer 的人就大家知道这个是等级非常高的一个 console。那他们都非常重视实务操作，然后跟唱片公司之间啊，包括演唱会之间需要的技术工程，1对1的这样子的方式啊，一个人就一个机器这样子在实地操作这个学校，那是非常重视实务的。那 Mark 就是从这个学校毕业的，那他也当然非常杰出，有非常多的格拉美奖啊在手上。那我们等一下就依序请 Mark， 然后之后 Eric 这边介绍也是纽约跟其他的背景，然后再比较特别的，在 Jin 再介绍一下瑞典那个学校，然后之后我们请周先从您听到的再做一些建议，就关于人才培育这方面再做个总结。好，我们现在先从 Peter 这边开始。
Oh, okay. Hi. Yes, I teach at an MA course, a master's course at the University of Agder, AGDER, which is in Kristiansand. And what's interesting about that course is that it's a 2-year course, and it involves all the students, whatever they're doing, whether they want to become managers or run record companies, they all have to do something creative. Luckily, that doesn't include the faculty. But our professor is a leading saxophone player in Norway and has been the chairman of one of the collection societies in Norway. So it's very, very good, and it's a small, not as organized as it could be, but it's a good environment and very encouraging. In the UK, I'm going to be doing a course with an accountant friend of mine who used to be an internal auditing accountant at EMI and also at Warner's, and we're going to be trying to do a course of sort of for one semester on economics and the music business. In other words, trying to link the sort of basic principles of economics with the principles of business in the music, the professional music world. So that's to be thinking about market segmentation, to be thinking about opportunity costs, to think about transaction costs, to think about supply and demand and all the other things, and pricing policy, and all the various ways in which you should be thinking about what you're doing. Now, I was trained as an economist in my distant youth, but I find, and I always thought a lot of this was not very useful. But when you use the ideas to think about what you're doing, it's very interesting. So, for instance, if you charge $100 for a concert, are you going to get more revenue than if you charge $1,000? Now that is not a stupid question, but it's an interesting question. What price should you charge for a concert? Depends on your view of the capacity, how strong the demand is, and how much money the public for that sort of band has. It's not a simple question. In the same way, what's the best way of spending money? You've got a budget. What should you budget for advertising and for marketing? And where should you place that marketing? And why? These are very interesting and complex questions which, as time goes on and you're in the business, you realize that you are informally using these ideas. And if you learn about them at school, before you start losing your money, it's probably quite a good idea to be thinking about how to spend your money. And one of the classic things I always say to artists when they say, oh, I need to do this vocal again and then remix it, I say to them, that's going to cost you $1,000. Is it going to sell you $1,000 worth of extra records? And that's a question they don't like to be asked, but it's a question they should be asked. Is the extra expenditure going to generate enough revenue to pay back that extra expenditure? These are quite subtle and complex issues, actually. They're not simple. They're simple questions, but they're complicated answers. So anyway, the University of Hertfordshire has an undergraduate course, which is very good, and the person in charge of it is someone who's been a music publisher for a long time, and the other professor is a composer, and there's also someone who spent a long time in the PR business, as well as myself and my colleague doing the economic side. So there's some interesting stuff there. Of course, there's also Liverpool University. LIPA is a very good school, and I don't know whether you can get in if you're not British, but there's no question the Brit School is fantastic, and I don't know whether it's available for non-British students because it's for younger. It's a school, not a university. It is available. Yeah, and they have an extraordinary record of the number of people that they put through. And I've never been, in principle, a big fan of it, but I can see that it has generated an awful lot of successful careers. And that is for people, that's a school for talent rather than for management of that talent. And the things I've been talking about really are more about music management than about developing skills for creators. I'm sure there are many more, and what I think you could do is there a British Council office here in Taiwan? Because if they have something, that you should get them to do a list for you of all the colleges, because I know now that there are a lot of departments in the UK, and I think the very process of going to the UK or the US is in itself of great value, because it puts you into becoming part of a very different musical culture, you know.
因为Peter 我会问你的原因是因为我发现在英国有非常非常多可以选择的学校，所以你刚刚列的那几个学校其实是一个很好的一个 direction。那另外我想要请教一下 Mark， 在美国当然有很多学校，那你来的学校或者说你知道的学校里面，像 McGill 在 Montreal 也是很好的录音学校。
Yeah, there's quite a few in Canada as well. Trevis, Fanshawe are great schools. The school that you're referring to that I went to, of which I was an alumni of, is the Institute of Audio Research on University Place in Manhattan by NYU. So I went there while I was still in high school in New York City, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do early on. I definitely wanted to get into the engineering side, but I quickly learned that it's really hard to make records from a blackboard, right? So the only way you can really learn how to make records is to get behind the wheel and drive the car. So as soon as I graduated from high school, I got a letter of recommendation from the owner of the school, one of the founding members, Irv Deal. And I went to London, England, wrote down all the studios that I liked on all my favorite records. And I just walked London for 2 weeks and pounded on doors. And I was very fortunate to get a job as a T-boy at a studio owned by Sir George Martin, and who produced all the Beatle records. And I was just a T-boy, getting cigarettes, coffee, whatever anyone needed. But I kind of went there every day thinking it was a job, when in actuality I was just working for free. And then they said, you know, you're here every day, why don't you just work for us? So they put me to work, and I got my name on, they put me, because I was from New York, they put me with all the American clients that were coming into Air Studios. And it worked out great, because I was able to get my name on a lot of cool records, and a lot of film projects were done there. And I brought those credits back to New York, because in this business, on my side of the business, it's all about the credits. Who have you worked with? Who have you produced? Who have you engineered? Who have you mixed? So when I came back to New York, after 2 years in London, I was able to get a job at a record company called Vanguard Records, which is coincidentally was the studio where we did all our workshops at the Institute of Audio Research, because at that time they couldn't afford their own studio. So we did all the workshops over at Vanguard. So anyway, I worked there for almost 11 years until they sold the company in the late 80s. And then I went independent and had a very successful career as a mixer and engineer and producer, and just traveled the world making records, having a lot of success. It was a lot of fun. And then fast forward to last year, well, like in '97, I started my own company for music, film, television, exploiting the masters and copyrights for the clients and artists that I was involved with. See, quite often I'd produce records for independent acts, and they'd come back to me, and I'd move on to the next act, and then they'd come back to me a year later and say, oh, you know, we can't get a deal, we don't know what to do, So I went and got a distribution deal with Universal, and I was able to put out the masters by the clients that I was hired to produce. And it gave them a bit of an edge up, just in terms of getting the record on, and they didn't really have to go out pounding on doors. And then I went to bed with a company called Alliance Atlantis in Canada, which is a $1 billion a year home entertainment company. And their publishing division came to me and said, you know, your clients own all their masters, so can we use your masters and copyrights in our feature-length film and television programming? And they were paying me $3,000 an insertion, whether it was film or TV. And I went, great, this is phenomenal, because we're getting, the records are creating value. The masters and copyrights are creating value immediately by putting them into something that's making them money. Which is really how the business is based today. If your masters and copyrights have generated no revenue, then there's no advance. It's as simple as that. The days of signing acts for, you know, $1 million because you sounded really cool, they do not exist anymore. If you sold 10,000 records and created 100 grand in revenue, or you put one song in a movie and it made 50 grand, and you licensed something to Japan, and you licensed something to Germany, and that created $200,000 of revenue, a record company will now only give you a percentage of that money that it's generated, and only until it's documented will they give you a percentage of that revenue, because they know that money's in the pipeline and it's a safe investment for the record companies. There's no more money that's just being thrown around. But fast forward to 2011, with the advent of the recording technology, just the way everyone can make a record now. It's not like, you know, I used to go into New York City studios and spend $5,000 a day on a lockout basis for a recording studio, for the Hit Factory, the record plant. Like, that was a lot of money to spend. But today, everyone has a studio in their bedroom, right? So everyone's making these records. I find that people at conferences much like this would always come up to me and say, you know, help us, what do we do? How do we get it out? How do we get it up and running? A lot of artists don't even know the real value in a master and copyright in terms of soliciting out the film, television, video games, advertising agencies, and just getting it up and running around the world. So we came up with something with my partner Ford, who's worked with Snoop Dogg and Mariah Carey and a bunch of really cool artists. Something called the Seminar for International Music Business and Audio Technology. And it's basically a 7-day seminar course. And we've been kind of putting it out around the different territories around the world to great reception. And yet it's a 7-day intensive music business. Like, what can we do with this master? How can we create revenue from this master that we just spent our time, effort, energy, and money making? And then there's an audio component to it as well, which is from a Ford, who's a certified Pro Tools instructor based out of Atlanta. And we have this seminar, which is basically 7 days, intensive, 10 hours a day, covering all aspects of the music business. And it just gives artists a bit of an edge up on how to exploit these masters and copyrights on their own and get them up and running on their own. Because basically it's done by clients on their own today. You know, they're getting stuff up and running by themselves. So that's how I'm involved in the educational side of the music business now.
从你的观点来看啊 ，Mark， 就是从你的观点来看 ，Mark 跟 Peter 从你们的观点来看，过去的教育这些，或者你知道的教育体系里面教流行音乐这个部分，对你后来的这个工作产业，在这个流行音乐产业里面，有实际上很直接的帮助吗？很短的回答就好。有什么缺点、优点都可以讲。
I think making music's making music. You know, it's, whether it's pop, rock, hardcore, hip hop, whatever. It's got to come from the heart. It's got to come from the soul. And at the end of the day, you've got to make a great record that's catchy and hooky and can get up and running relatively quickly. Because the lifespan of a record today is very, very short on the marketplace.
I mean, I think that probably if you came from here and went to a school in the US or the UK or Norway, the most valuable thing you can do is play your own music. On the one hand, get gigs, either free or paid, and learn your craft and learn to play to a foreign audience. That's nothing beats that. Learn to make your own recordings and judge those. But what you can learn, and you do need to learn, is things about how the business works, how the legal system works, how the economics of the business works. And that can have enormous value, so that you're less likely to be destroyed by the business, because the business has a terrible history of destroying their artists. The casualty rate for artists in the music business is very, very high. And that is not a coincidence. Most of your gigs you do are initially or in bars or hanging out with people who do drugs. So, you're in a very vulnerable area, you're very young, you might suddenly make a lot of money and then you don't make any money, or you might be able to make no money, and it's how the hell are you going to live? So it's a very rough, tough business. And I think there is a lot of value to be had from learning what the structure of the business is and learning how to think about what you're doing and be aware of what you're doing. I don't think there are any answers. And I think perhaps the best thing you can get from it is to be in some way to become, do you have the word apprentice do you have apprenticeships? But learning learning your craft in it by looking at other people, like you were saying, working in the studio with people like George Martin, with great engineers. You can't help learning how to become an engineer. I learned how to be a producer by working in Abbey Road when the Beatles were down the corridor and the engineers were working with the Beatles, and then they'd work with me and my artists. A lot of stuff rubs off that way.
One point, I worked on Live and Let Die with McCartney and Wings, which is a live, off the floor, except for the vocals, 63-piece orchestra. Do you know how many ashtrays I emptied that day?
Yeah, quite
quite a lot of ashtrays. I'm telling you, a lot of ashtrays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite a lot of smoke. No, I think this is, this sort of thing is really important to sort of, if you're a support band with an artist, to see how the lead band works, how the road crew work, how they structure their how they structure their sets, how they relate to the audience. You may not like what they do, but if they're selling tickets and you're not selling tickets, they've got something to teach you just by looking, just by using your eyes and being aware of what you're looking for.
I also think technology today, as fast as it is, has created these immediate records in their bedroom, and they don't go through that process, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's just, I made a hit record, and I did it in 24 hours in my bedroom, and they don't have that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours concept of going out and touring and playing bars, like I said.
Actually,
but I think even if you do have that success, you often then need to go out and do the 10,000 hours.
Absolutely.
Or else you are that
It's
famous beast, a one-hit wonder.
Absolutely, it's over.
Well, that's why I need to mention a little bit about all of this. 就是说，其实我们经过了访查以后，有一个大致的一个结论，就是说，大概大家想要就是说经营教育、流行音乐教育这一块，大家有一致的意见啊，有3个区块想要做到，就是分序渐进的区块。第一个是所谓的咨询，需要咨询的这个阶段。第二个是所谓的认证，我现在是用统称的名词不一定是用这样子的名词就是概括的。第二个是认证，第3个才是所谓的专属学位。那为什么会有这样子3个方向的原因，就是刚刚他们提到的很多的这个经验流程。因为如果没有经过咨询的过程，其实你学了音乐，你其实未必是适合做艺人，未必适合做创作。你学了 IT， 未必你是真的要做 IT， 其实你有另外一个专长，搞不好是在做创作。有很多人其实都有这个状况，所以我们因为这样子的情况下，就是说为什么要跟 IT 界多做沟通交流，或各个像各个产业，包括经济的，包括各个产业做交流，就是这样，他们的需求，然后怎么样去打造一个更好的一个健全的一个体系。那从这个角度呢，我想再来多请教其他的人。我先从静好了。静，你从那个瑞典那边来带来一个学校，这个学校是全世界最特别的哦，就是说他们学校是给素人，就是说你本来不是音乐专业的，你本来没有学过 IT， 你没有学过设计，可是呢，他用大学等级这样的课程，然后教育你。学校学生都还没毕业的时候，大家就争先恐后的跟他们签约，有很多成功的故事。那可不可以就说从你跟他们接触里面，你来介绍一下这个学校，这样子？
这个学校的名称叫 Music Marknard，Am I right？ Marknard， 那 Marknard 事实上呢，在瑞典文来讲是一个 marketing 跟一个还有是 production 的学校的意思。那这个学校当初成立是大概1997年、98年的时候，是创校的校长呢，他是说。那个时候，全瑞典已经是在全世界，在作曲、制作还有这个音乐的产业上，已经是列为这个全世界第3大国。那很多作曲人呢，都做出很棒的音乐。尤其你们现在如果仔细的调查一下的话，大概全世界的Billboard 排行榜前100名，有大概至少在30首曲子都是从瑞典这个国家出来的。所以这可以显见的说，这个国家对于作曲方面有很大的一些他们本身的一些成就在。那可是呢，一般大学的过程里面没有说很专业的教如何作曲这方面，所以这学校呢就成立，他们是学，要从一个没有受过音乐训练，然后呢还没有经过大学的这个程度的，那如何呢能够很快进入这个市场？所以这个学校的校长呢就成立了这个2年的这个课程，2年课程它有400个学分。目前的话，这学校的话，从一开始本来是没有跟这个大学连接的，可是最近几年因为学校的这个很多需求，有些大学呢就愿意跟他配合，就是他承认他的学分，那就是他会有他自己本身的一个证书，可是呢，他可以让你转到大学继续有学士跟后面的硕士的这些可能性在，不过呢，据我所知道，一般他们这个学校出来的学生呢，几乎都很快在1年左右就已经有很多人找他们工作，或者用他们的曲子，用他们的这个曾经这个我们今天在座的这个证人里面，就是一跟 Hayden 他们公司就用了很多从这个学校里毕业的，还有还没毕业的学生，那他们这个曲子呢，像现在很多世界很有名的艺人有在，比如说 David Guetta 的那个 Just One Last Time 这条曲子也是这个他们学校的学生里面做出来的。目前好像刚出炉就是 One Direction 那个新的这个专辑里面也用了很多他们学校学生的作曲啊。那这个是他们非常特别的，就是教学生如何作曲。那你如何作曲之外呢，他也顺便就是所有的过程，他都会有很实际的一个实习的一个环境，在学校里面有那个 studio， 它是24小时7天你都随时可以用的。那另外呢，就安排了非常实际的一个实际的课程，像直接就到这个像黑人他们的公司去做实习的机会。那也直接的呢，他们所有的教师老师呢，都是从行业里面直接进来，做辅导或教育方面，一边他就跟作曲人一边写，他一边练，然后大家的这种互相的错接的方式，跟一般大学的教学过程不太一样的，就是非常实际的一个学校。目前的话，这个学校课程方面呢是瑞典语为重。他们现在正在积极在找国际的学生。如果说国际学生有兴趣，如果能够凑足到大概20个学生的话， 他们会就马上成立一个英文体系的一个教学。那我自己看，就是我自己目睹他们从零开始的一个学校，然后到达现在这个学校现在目前，他们一年的这个学生是30个，所以这个学校只有60个学生。那60个学生的课程里面呢，大家要彼此要练习如何跟彼此写作，大家也有一种就是所谓的那样竞赛的一种方式。然后呢，这个作品呢就会拿到各个公司去给他们听、给他们看，去收取他们的这个经验回来。所以这个对学生来讲的话，是对市场上很直接的一个吸收的一个资讯，跟一般大学里这种理论派的，或者说这个我相信很多教授他教材都是在10年20年不换的啊。那在这个学校里面都不太可能有这种方式，他的说给你的资讯都是现在市场上最新最流行的。所以这个学校老师现在的话就是他们很希望说跟国际学生也能够有些交流、有些交换的方式。那他也借我这次来介绍他们家。那如果说在座大家有兴趣的话，明天我们可以再做比较更仔细的一个介绍。
另外就是说我补充一点啊，就是 before I ask you a question， 就是请问 Eric 再多介绍一下 Berkeley， 因为 Berkeley 跟你的学校，就是说其实，在亚洲地区，我们日本那边大概有400多位到500多位的 Berkeley College of Music 的毕业生，然后台湾大概有100多位，然后大陆应该也有100多位，然后新加坡也不少。那其实这些毕业生已经都提供了一个种子的师资，也就是说，他们在美国学完回来以后，其实并不是从事流行音乐产业，并没有衔接起来。但是呢，他们有些人其实是很适合来做衔接的，就是说教育方面的一些师资的一个很好的人才。那有些是当做咨询，有些因为他在业界里面，其实他做的事情是跨产业，可能他念了音乐以后回来国内这边，就是在台湾也好，在中国大陆、在日本，他做的产业也许不一样。但是现在我们需要他们，也许再 recruit 起来，然后变成一个种子的师资。这个就是我刚刚提到，就是说，经过大家讨论过以后，有认证，有不同的，有像咨询认证，然后以及说慢慢做出成绩以后，当然才有教育部各个地区的教育部会。各个学校会跟你做真正的衔接这样的一个课程。那我想请 Eric 来谈一下，就是说因为你帮我们问了很多学校，那从你的角度而言哈，因为介绍每个学校这个资料，我们那个专案办公室里面有非常多细节，那个学校里面的内容几十页啊，不是在这边要讨论课程。我想从你，因为你接触很多艺人，然后接触很多表演，然后你带的很多都是新的乐团，你开发很多新的乐团，跟访问很多新的乐团，所以我想，你从一个专业的流行音乐的学校毕业出来，你觉得这些专业的学校到底给你有什么样的帮助，或者说你觉得如果未来有这些专业的学校，它其实需要多做哪些方面的改进？有没有？I can even hear the translation.
I actually went to Rutgers for economics, and then went to University of Toulouse. No. I did not go to music school, actually. I came from the somewhat same background as Peter as an economist, and then kind of meandered my way into the music. But following in Peter's footsteps is the best thing anybody could do, so. But certainly in the States, I mean, we have worked with NYU. We work with NYU. We work with Baruch College, or a lot of the colleges in the CUNY, City University of New York program, Columbia College in Chicago, a lot with their internship programs and helping our company. For example, all of our staff initially come from those schools for everything we do in regard to promoting music in China and Greater China. And for this, actually talking about Berkeley, one of my good friends at Berkeley, Peter Spellman, has been one of the leaders there in developing the music business programs and et cetera. And he was nice enough to share with me the Berklee School of Music strategic plan for the next 3 years from 2012 to 2015. So if anybody would like to have a copy of that, feel free to see me after the talk, give me your email, and I'll shoot you the report. But what I want to do is maybe talk about 3 trends that are happening, illustrated by Berklee and also some other schools. The first trend, I think, really, since I started my company Music, is really the development of music business. Universities and the music schools have all been focused really on performance. One of the schools we're talking to about working with is actually the Frost School of Music at University of Miami. And they're quite specific in saying they're one of the oldest, if not the oldest, music schools within a private university. And they're actually very specific about identifying themselves as a school for performance. But quite recently, not so recently, but they were one of the first to, and I'm going to read from this, to develop music business and entertainment as well as music engineering technology programs, and it was the first of its kind in the nation. And what the internet's really done is made people aware of the importance of the business side. I think before that it was very much a development of the craft, what Peter was speaking of, which is still, I think, at the core, but understanding how the business works, and especially in the digital, how to market your music and et cetera. When we work with NYU is one of the leaders in actually teaching this and et cetera. And you're seeing this, it has really mushroomed across all the schools. If you look at Berklee, you look at, actually, to some extent, one of the leading schools in this would be Full Sail, which is a private school, the most expensive private school actually in the United States. Not only are they in music, but it's really interdisciplinary. So they have video game, film, and et cetera, all under one school, all music technology and et cetera. I'm actually looking at the entire thing. You got film, game development, music business, recording arts, all the arts, because in today's world, in the digital environment, it's all integrated. There's not music here, and then you got film there, and you got video. It's all integrated. It's all really one industry, and there has to be collaboration between all these components. And the schools, and Full Sail is probably at the forefront of this, but the schools are realizing this and trying to, from an educational level, to try to branch all these together into one school, allowing collaboration between different students and et cetera. The other thing is really career development. I mean, it's great that you go to school and you have a diploma, but if you don't know what to do with that diploma, it doesn't really amount to much. And the schools have really emphasized internship programs, where I was mentioning we work with a lot of the schools on internship programs. Berklee, for example, has, in 2005, they had about 150 interns. And they really expanded the internship program during that time, expanding to initially LA, then London, and now actually Berklee students can do an internship to any company in the world that they will support. And so it's really almost quadrupled the amount of internship placements that they've had, and et cetera, because of the necessity of getting a professional experience. Education's not enough if you can't key it in to how does a business really work, not just from the academic point of view. And so this has been a big trend that we've been seeing in music education in the US. Another one is actually, and this is, I know for the States, is international scope. Again, Juilliard is opening a school in Shanghai. Berklee opened one recently in Spain, in Valencia. And they actually developed their first ever master's degree program for contemporary studio performance, scoring for film, TV, video games, and global entertainment and music business. Also, and these were all launched September 2012, so this year, just 2 months ago in Spain. In addition, they created the International Career Center. And this International Career Center is meant to work with music industry partners. So not just academia in the, what we call the White Tower? What do we call academia? ivory tower. To get away from the ivory tower and really interconnect with companies so that they can really develop an environment where again, the students on an international basis can gain an experience, because we know that we're going into a more global industry and these schools are preparing for this. Berkeley is also, and I think all the schools are looking at this, is also very much push mentoring, job seeker support groups where you have alumni forming groups to support students and back them after they get out of school. Berkeley also, which was very buzzy at the time because it hadn't been done before, came out with a document called Music Positions and Salary Guides, because this information wasn't really out there. You know, what position in the music industry and how much would I expect to make and et cetera. And this had a really huge impact on the music business and really put Berkeley kind of in everybody's face. One of the things that Berkeley's also done that's really different, Berkeley's worked with MIDEM. MIDEM is the largest music conference in the world, happens in Cannes every year, and with Harvard Business School in doing the Rethink Music Conference. We've been a media sponsor of Rethink since the beginning. And it's really kind of like a think tank type of conference that brings in decision makers, really influential people to talk concretely about what solutions can be done. And for the students and the faculty, this is an incredible opportunity to get a much broader view of not just what's happening today, but what are the issues about tomorrow. And finally, the other thing that I've seen that's been really big is online education. Berkeley has been a leader in this. Full Sail has also been a leader in this, and I actually see that Full Sail offers twice as many degrees through their online program than they do through their normal standard physical program. And so the online aspect and e-education has really gone at the forefront for most of these schools. So those are the kind of trends I want to spot out.
Yes, of course. 其实我们收集到的资料里面有一个很简单的结论刚听到大家的说法里面其实现在学校各种专业的学校里面有一个趋势，现在大家都朝一个方向进行，就是说，像我，刚从美国回来的时候，看到报纸就很大的一个头条新闻写，大学的教育真的要4年吗？是不是2年就可以做完？然后我又看到一则新闻，非常大的就是说介绍 Benz 的汽车厂，汽车厂里面第一次公开揭露，它里面的技师所有最精湛的这些工艺，全部都只收高中高技这种那个技工，他不收大学生。那他强调的就是，找来的人就是要技术实际能够展现的，然后现在的学校教出来的学生要能够跟产业能够连接。那我们经过了调查以后发现，就是说，像去 Berkeley 学完回来，我很多朋友就是从 Berkeley 学回来以后，其实去做房地产，去做别的产业，不是他们对音乐没兴趣，是他学的是教他们怎么样。像比方 NYU 里面，我当时也有申请他教我们实习的部分，其实是实习怎么样进入美国的 marketing， 怎么样去实习美国的 promotion。但是那些产业跟大中华地区，以中国大陆跟台湾来说，然后这个复杂的数位平台跟现在的交易的模式，一点都派不上用场。这个是一个非常实际的问题。全世界最复杂的地区，免费却能够赚钱，然后 application 里面操作使用最复杂、最多人的地区，是在现在我们这个地区。所以有很多课程其实是需要跟本地当地的，包括软体开发商，包括 IT 公司，包括电脑制造商，包括教育、财经的这些专家结合起来，为流行音乐打造一个全新的课程。借由过去西方的很多学校已经有的一些制度，再把它改善，然后进入来大中华地区设一个专门学校。关于这一点呢，我想请周先生给我们一个 就是说全面式的，因为你的经验啊，其实对我们音乐来说非常重要的，就是说从财务跟管理这一部分啊，其实是一个很全面的，必须要你给我们一些建议，怎么样做一个长远的计划，然后或者说一个好的，因为这是一个很值得投资的，因为中国大陆有我看到的报告都不一啊，4000万人到6000万人学音乐，然后学英文也是6000万人，这些数字都已经是几年前，现在写的是4000万人。你们可以想象哦，像朗朗这样的人，未来10年内，全球有10个音乐家有名，其中3个可能就是中国大陆出来。请问谁在 manage 他在全球的演出？有可能就是台湾人，有可能就是中国的人。为什么？因为第一个能够跟他沟通的人，他出来到长大之前，一定是在这个区域产生。所以这些 management 就是说一定会发生在这个区域。如果没有好的一个教育，没有把经济制度建立起来，没有好的环境，这些人才，将来这些音乐家就会像台湾以前很早出国留学得到银牌奖、金牌奖那些音乐家们，慢慢都不见。所以我想请周先给我们一些想法跟交流。
好，谢谢。我就从我熟悉的领域和角度来看一看这件事情。大概20多年前，在1990年，我在纽约工作，我在摩根士丹利。那个时候呢，我帮我的一些日本客户看他们在美国做的一些投资。那他们投资什么呢？他们投资了电影，他们投资了 entertainment 娱乐业。那么在一些基金，那么也就是说，他大概有7到10年的时间，然后来整个看一看这个机会。那么我帮他们看了以后呢，我大概看了有8个重要的基金。那么最后的结论是，大概没有什么人真的赚到过钱，大部分的基金到最后呢都是亏损的，对投资人而言是亏损。那么我就问了这些日本人，我说在这几年的时间里面，你到底有什么收获？那么你学到了什么？这些日本人告诉我说，第一收获，我参加了3次的奥斯卡颁奖典礼。那么第二呢，我跟好几个漂亮的女明星吃过饭。那么其他呢就谈不上了。学到了什么呢？他说我学到了世界上最高风险的风险投资就是 entertainment。那么之后呢，他们就很少看到日本的投资人在这个领域里面在投资大笔的钱。那么今天呢，我们看到在台湾，文创事业是一个风潮，那么也看到了一些文创的基金。那么我看了一下这些基金呢，它的资金的来源呢，除了有政府的公部门政策性的投资以外呢，大部分的来自 private sector 就是私人的钱呢，大部分都是过去就是这些成功的老板，那么我们在台面上看到的人。那么在过去的20-30年里面，他们很辛劳的工作，生活呢没有什么乐趣可言。到了现在，他们希望提升一下自己的气质，丰富自己的生活，所以呢就把一些钱放到了这些文创的基金。但是如果很快的他们发现这个文创的事业的投资不是像他们过去所想象的，或者不像他们过去很熟悉的，就是经验不断的累积就会越做越好，那么他们就会再次退出。为什么这些日本人在20多年前告诉我这是风险最高的投资呢？他们还告诉我一件事情，就是原来大导演也有失手的时候，原来大牌的演员也有不卖座的时候，而这个呢是没有一个 pattern 可以遵循的。所以我们现在要把这个产业做起来。我刚才听到了许多的先生还有 Jean 的对 training 对于 education 这个领域的介绍，我有非常非常深切的感觉。因为这一个领域，我现在姑且先用领域这个名称，如果要能够吸引够多的投资人，它必须要变成一个产业，就是它必须是一个 industry， 它必须是一个 business。因为所有的投资人，他不是来赞助才华洋溢的个人，或者我们说 talent， 他是来赞助一个可以可长可久的生意。那么再清楚一点的说，投资是可以获利的，是有回报的。 那么在几年前，我在东京在东京工科大学开会，在那个会议里面，我见到了南加州大学的电影系的教授，我就问了他一个问题，我说现在中国的市场开始蓬勃的发展了，中国有13亿的消费者，大家都会对于娱乐事业，对于 entertainment 会愿意花钱的。我说我的 question 是，请问你，中国会有自己的好莱坞，还是你认为美国的好莱坞会席卷中国？他想都不想，这是当然好几年前的事情，他想都不想就告诉我说，美国的好莱坞会席卷中国。那我说，那你能不能解释为什么？他说，美国的好莱坞是一个 system， 它有足够的人才，当然毋庸置疑，那么它也有足够的资金，不断的 pump 进来，而且它有很好的法律的环境，跟许多金融的环境去保护这些投资人，或者去确保这些投资人的利益。所以在这么多的 party 的合作底下，他创造了这么一个重要而且成功的产业。而今天他说在中国或者在 Greater China 没有这个 system， 所以他认为美国的好莱坞会席卷中国。那么从这几个重要的观念，还有刚才几位先生女士所谈到的，我们就知道有一件非常重要的事情，就是在这个产业里面的人才培育一定是2个方面的，一方面是 creative talents， 就是这些艺人、艺术家，另外呢就是帮这些艺术家发挥商业价值的一群专业的人士。那么我不认为艺术家会变成好的 businessman，那我也认为很难好的 businessman 会变成艺术家。刚才 Peter 说了，有很多的音乐公司、艺术公司扼杀了许多的 talent， 扼杀了许多的 artist。但是我也可以告诉 Peter， 这些公司也扼杀了很多的投资人。那么基本上一群苦主在这个行业里面。所以呢，我们现在认为有一个很好的机会，因为大中华的市场够大。大中华的市场，刚才 Tom 也讲了，没有 legacy， 没有包袱，所以我们有一个很好的机会把这个 system 建制起来，然后让大家都成功。那么因此，一个 training education 的 system， 把全世界好的东西搬进来，显然有它的意义存在。英国在这方面是非常成功的 example。英国的文化产业大概占了 GDP 的8%。超过100万的从业人员，它的年产值大概560-70亿英镑。那么在2004年的时候呢，在英国的产业界的人和政府共同的去发掘到，从2004年到2014年未来10年，整个文化产业要增加20万个工作人员，所以他们就initiate 了一个叫做 Cultural Leadership Program， 我想在英国是很成功的，放进去至少2200万英镑，从政府拨预算，当然再加上民间，再加上其他的专业的人士进去，那个资源是非常非常多的。所以我的看法，起码在大中华地区，那么这个产业还是新的产业，还是年轻的产业，它没有一个好的 system， 但是它也没有包袱，所以是一个非常好的一个 timing point， 去开始 establish 这个education 的这个平台。那么有了这个之后 ，investor 投资人就会进来，投资人进来赚过钱了以后，他就会 support 更多的 artists 去做他们的这个发挥。所以我的看法是，现在是 it's timing。Any
comments, gentlemen?
So you've got it. Okay. First of all, let me say that I think that is it a professional, is it a craft? I think is a very interesting thing. I don't have an answer. It's somehow a bit of both. I wonder how far we can teach something which is as anarchic and as chaotic and as dangerous as creativity. I think that's a very important consideration for governments. Is it a right place for government to be? The government perhaps can teach you how to play in tune or how to paint a picture or reproduce something, but can it teach you to be Jackson Pollock? Can it teach you to be the Beatles? Can it teach you to be the Sex Pistols? Will a government program permit you to be the Sex Pistols? I think not. And I think that the most successful era in the UK for education in the arts was when I was young, in the 50s and 60s. We had art schools where you did not have to have any academic qualifications to get into. You did not have to pass any exams. You just had to present a portfolio of interesting and creative stuff, not even products, stuff. And if they thought you were interesting and creative, you got given a grant to go to that school, and you didn't have to go to any classes. You just got a grant and you were there. And a lot of the people who came in as painters ended up being in the Rolling Stones or being Jimmy Page or being Eric Clapton. In other words, there was a sort of license to anarchy. And that is a very dangerous concept to sell to any politician. And I wonder whether all this education we do is actually not a good idea. I'm very schizophrenic about it, because at the same time I think that you should be learning from the experience of other people, whether it's my experience or other musicians or other creators' experience. And I think it's very important that we should not forget the value of just learning at the sort of by doing. You know, many of the best managers started as just guys who helped carry the amps into the gigs, and then they became tour managers, and then they became managers, and some of them became very successful. I think these sorts of ways of developing, learning your way into the industry are really important. But the negative side of that is when you do that, you don't know the dangers. You don't learn how to think analytically. And so it's somehow, how can you get the mix of the arts and the skills and working with people and so on? So I just raise those as questions, not as answers. From the point of view of people here in Taiwan, I think there's no question you need to have very good English. If you're going to go to the UK, or you're going to go to America or Norway, if you don't speak good English, you won't know what the hell is going on. So before you go, learn your English. I know that's really boring, and I think, but, fine. If you're going to learn how to be Chinese musicians, you don't have to bother. And maybe that's the way to go. Last thing that I want to say is that a good education, a good course in the music business, I think you can have a course in the music business much better than a course in how to be a musician. But if you have a good course in the music business, even though you don't become a successful music business person, maybe you learn lots of useful skills for any business. There's a lot of stuff that we learn in the music business which really applies to any high-risk business, any high-risk, innovative, creative business.
Thank you.
I want to address the issue of investment, because I think it's really an important one. I think, Peter, you mentioned, I think the traditional image of the manager is someone who was the roadie on a tour, who, the young kid who started, learned step by step, and ended up kind of rising up to being a manager. And for an investment community, that's not a way to run a business. You want to have people that have, so I think, we have to take, first of all, disaggregate the development of craft, the craft of the musician, et cetera, and the understanding of the business, of the industry, especially we're not a static industry. We are one of the fastest, most dynamic industries, the cultural industries. We literally drive the internet. Most of the marketing, content drives the internet, has done it from the beginning. When I started in 1997, music and the internet were just starting, but it has driven how we market, social media, and et cetera. So I think, we have to realize that we're really an industry, and we have to have an education system that not only forms professional people like in any other industry, but realizes that we're in an industry interconnected. Music industry is nothing compared to the video game industry in size. Video game industry is $76 billion. No problem getting investors for the video game industry. Video games need music. Film needs music. So we're almost a primary resource for any of the successful industries. So we're necessary. And so music people also have to realize it's not just about writing a song and et cetera. We are in an ecosystem. I think in school is where we learn this, and I think that's where education is important. The other thing I wanted to make a point, if Taiwan wants to retain its leadership as a Mandarin pop producer, cultural leadership, and wants to extend that worldwide, they have to start interconnecting with other institutions around the world. And I mean, American universities in almost every field have been very aggressive in going around the world, Dubai and et cetera. I think this is something that Taiwan has to look at, and perhaps the Rethink Music Conference that Berkeley does is something that Taiwan should consider and really would provide inspiration for people that are looking at getting into this industry. And it's not just a Taiwan market, it's the global market. So I think we have to Taiwan needs to develop global links with institutions in other countries to really interconnect. And then we can go to investors and say, I believe, maybe you can tell me wrong, but they'll say, now I see, I can judge risk, and I can judge potential reward, and et cetera, and I can invest.
But Eric, there's one, just one very bit, then you're coming to this is probably relevant to what you're saying. We're in a declining industry. That's the irony.
The recording industry is declining. The music industry
The live music industry is also, I think, in relative decline because there's not the new artists coming through because of the decline in the recorded industry. And yet the use of music is growing. I think it's a very difficult time and issue. But I'm sorry, I interrupt.
Well, that's okay. Peter. The revenue of record industry is declining, but the consumption of music is increasing, and it's increasing every day. So Eric's point is well taken. The video game industry is a good example because people pay for video games. They pay to play, but people don't pay to listen to music. So the problem is the business model. We have to get people to pay.
其实同样的道理大家会付频宽费，可是大家记不记得你们在家里面看的 cable， 你们付的钱里面2块钱是付给 HBO，1块钱是付给 MTV 台，还有付新闻等等，你们缴了600多块嘛那其实呢，同样道理，你们付的电信的频宽费3G 里面，其实也有可能就是未来就是有一部分就是付给音乐，其实可以是那么简单，所以大家用音乐都免费，其实是从频宽费里面就直接扣除。那这个就是一种新的 business model 的意思。那这样子的一来呢，其实不管追踪、管理等等都变得非常好。那技术的运用，增加频宽，你想要高解析度，你就租宽一点的频宽，你得到的影像跟品质也都变大变好。那其实这个就是值得讨论的地方，也是有很多技术其实都往这方面发展。那 Peter 其实前几天跟我们交流的时候，他也有提到，像杜比系统已经都开发出来。其实有很多人可能都不知道，其实像5.1 Surround 这种东西，已经 MP3 的5.1 Surround， 现在很多年前就已经有了，我们都已经试验过了。可是现在呢，新一代 Portable 的那个手机的新的 Surround 也都出来5.1，那品质呢是比现在的 MP3 还更好听的。有很多这种技术都已经出来了，准备下一代要洗新你的耳目。那未来这些东西如果没有好的音乐，其实 好坏也会听得出来。你在家里面制造又回到以前的竞争，就是说你到好的 studio 里面录音，其实还是听得出来的，又会回到原来的 old games。就是说整个的技术什么会改变，其实最重要的关键还是回到这个 business model。刚刚周先生提到，所有人提到的这个部分，这是非常重要。你能不能有做一个总结？那我们等一下，对，有没有要做总结？没有 ，OK。Do you have any conclusion? No, OK。那我们直接进行下一场最后的结语，就是说，我们想今天讨论最重要，我们就直接进行上下场，好不好？因为就刚刚耽误了一点点时间，我跟 Peter 不动，其他人谢谢你们参加。And we don't.